for joining the free preview of our Power BI course. The preview is only available for a limited time, so I encourage you to book 1 hour in your calendar. You can also break it up to multiple slots. Just make sure you allocate some time now to go through the lectures. Even if you're not planning to learn Power BI right now, take the chance, go through the course, and ask yourself these questions. Could this tool be useful for me or my company? Will it make my life easier? Could learning this skill be of benefit to my career? So some time ago, I sent a survey to my community of professionals asking whether they're currently using Power BI at work or not. 45% said they're already using it. 54% said they aren't using it, but they want and need to learn it, either because their company was planning to implement it or they wanted to boost their resume so that they could change jobs easier or just have better opportunities. Only 1% said they aren't curious. As I was reading the responses and the why behind the motivation of the people wanting to learn Power BI, I could see in my head the job posting of the future. Must know Power BI. And no, it's not for IT people. It's the requirement for many professions, just like these ones that you see here. These are the professions of the people that took our survey and are using Power BI. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to introduce you to this exciting tool. Let me start by telling you what Power BI is all about. Microsoft MVP, and I'm super excited to have you here. First, let's cover what Power BI is and what it's used for. So Power BI is a Microsoft Business Intelligence application. It was a clear leader in the March 2022 Gartner Magic Quadrant for analytics and business intelligence platforms. You can see Microsoft all the way up here. Power BI is an app that helps you combine data from different sources and systems and shape it in a way so you can understand what's going on in the business. You can identify dangers before they explode into massive headaches. That's also where you're going to discover opportunities that grow your business. Now, does this mean that Power BI is for creating beautiful reports from your data? Yeah, it can do that, but it can do a lot more. It's like saying your smartphone is for just making phone calls. When people see Power BI reports, they see this. Yeah, it's a beautiful report. For one, it's interactive. It can have drill down or drill through features, which managers love. It's very flexible. You can slice and dice as you need. You can add a lot of information in a small space using a few tricks. You're also not limited to the reports that you created. If right now you need to take a look at a different metric, no problem. You can go ahead and create what you need based on the underlying dataset. So can your colleagues. You don't need to create multiple predefined reports for them. They can create their own views and reports if they want. Best part is you have one source of truth. Everyone is talking about the same data and using the same calculations. If you love Excel and you still want to look at your data in Excel, you can. You can create pivot tables and create amazing Excel dashboards based on those pivot tables. The beauty is that the underlying data is the same no matter what type of report you want, a Power BI report or an Excel one. Now let's talk about sharing and accessing reports. Power BI reports can be accessed from the browser. You can access them from mobile with the Power BI app. You can embed Power BI reports live in a PowerPoint presentation. You can embed it in a website, or you can add it in your Teams channel. You can set alerts to get email notifications when a threshold is passed. You can schedule data to be automatically refreshed. Power BI for me is the ultimate definition of a self-service business intelligence tool. I believe that's why they were the leader in their field. You don't need to have IT background to understand it. It's for everyone. At my old company, we had other business intelligence tools, which were called self-service. Every time we needed a report, we had to inform IT, and then they contracted the consultants. I never understood why they were called self-service. I couldn't get what I wanted without going through multiple levels of approvals. With Power BI, you can create the reports that you want when you want. You can have beautiful visuals, and you can have pivot tables, reports on the browser, and reports in Excel. It's no longer one or the other. Finally, let's talk about the process of creating Power BI reports. You develop and create your reports in the free Power BI desktop application. And then you share these reports and the underlying data sets with other people in your organization. You have two options for sharing. Option one is cloud-hosted Power BI service. This is the more common approach, and it's available for a monthly subscription fee. Option two is an on-premises Power BI report server. This is for companies that don't want to use the Microsoft Cloud services. No matter which route your company takes though, whether they go cloud solution or on-premises solution, your starting point is Power BI Desktop. So in the next lecture, if you don't have it, we're going to install it together, and I'm going to give you a quick tour of the app and its potential. Getting started with Power BI is free, even if you aren't using Power BI at work right now. You can download it and learn the skills to be ready for the future. Just go to the Microsoft Store, search for Power BI Desktop, and here's the Power BI Desktop application. Install it if you don't have it yet. Once it's installed, open it up, sign in if you have an account. If you don't worry about signing in. You can use Power BI Desktop for free without signing in. You only need to sign in if you want to publish your reports to Power BI service. On this side, you're going to find some useful information, especially what's new. Power BI gets updates on a monthly basis. So this can be a good thing because it's always getting new developments and new features, but it can sometimes be annoying because you can open up the Power BI app and things look different, and you have to find your way around. Now, this is a challenge for us too. We're going to do our best to make it easy for you to still follow along, even if things might look different on your end to the screencasts here. Okay, so let's see what's behind this dialog box, and I'm going to give you a high-level overview of Power BI. This right here is your report canvas. This is where you're going to be designing and creating your reports. But the first step is to add data to your report, and you do it from here. Some common sources are here. Your very own recent sources will be here. Once you've connected and imported your data, you can view the data in the Data tab. Here you can make some adjustments to your data, especially when it comes to formatting or adding new columns. Next step is to model your data. So if you're dealing with multiple sources and multiple tables, you can relate them with one another here. This is where Power BI shines because a lot of other business intelligence tools require high-level IT knowledge for this modeling part. With Power BI, creating a proper data model is as easy as learning to play a card game. There's some basic rules to follow, and then you're all set to play. Plus, you're fully flexible to add in new requirements if you need, because the one in charge is you and your team, and not someone you need to wait for months to implement what you need. Once you've set up your model, which is only necessary if you have more than one table or one source, then you are ready to design your reports. You have access to many different visualizations, from the common ones to not so standard ones to AI visuals and tables and matrices, which are similar to Excel pivot tables. Just to demonstrate how easy it is to go through these steps, let's import something together. You can follow along with me if you like, and within 5 minutes, you've created your first Power BI report. On my website, I have an Excel file that has a list of all my tutorials on YouTube. We are going to connect to this with Power BI. I'm in Power BI. What's my first step? Is to get data, right? So let's go here and see the common data sources. Maybe you see it already here. If you don't, you can go to more, and you are going to see a ton of different data sources here. We have the common ones, Excel workbook, text CSV. You can connect to PDF, to a folder. You see Oracle, IBM, SQL, SAP, so many different sources. You can search for the different systems and apps you're using at work to see if a data source exists here. You can also browse based on the categories on the side. Now, in our case, I'm connecting to an Excel file, but that Excel file is on the web. So the type of connection that I need is a web connection. Let's just search for it. It's right here and click on Connect. So now we need to provide the URL of that file. I'm just going to go and grab it here from the site, right mouse click, copy link. See, when you hover over it, you can see the link on the bottom. That's the link that we need. Now I'm just going to paste it in here and then click on OK. Power BI is creating a connection to that file. And now this that you see here is Power Query. That file has different tabs. There's an Excel table. I'm going to place a check mark because that's the data that I want to import. Now I can just go ahead and load the data, or I can transform the data. Now, transforming the data gives you the ability to clean up the data. So you could remove columns, add columns, clean up any mess to get a proper data model. So for example, here I have link to video. In the Excel file, these are actual hyperlinks. Behind it is the official YouTube path. I can update these to be proper links because I happen to know the path that comes before these. We just have to go to Transform, Format, and add a prefix. And the prefix is HTTPS U2 and then .be. And then let's add a backslash as well and click on OK. Now I just want you to follow along with me and do the clicks. We are going to go through all this interface and all the different options available throughout the course. I just want to show you how simple it is to do these steps once you know where things are. Now let's load this to Power BI. We're going to go to Home, Close and Apply. Okay, it's loading our data. Now, what was the second step? Where can we go to see the data? Where would I have to click? Right here in the Data tab. Now we get to see everything that we imported. This is where you could add new columns if you want. You can also adjust the formatting. So if I select this column, we see this is a text column. You can also adjust the category type. Power BI recognizes special categories. So for example, this is a web link. I'm going to change that to a web URL. Now, what was the next step? Next step is modeling, right? But if you just have one single table, there is no modeling that you need to do because you don't need to connect it to anything else. So we can skip the third step here and go and create our report. Let's first add a slicer. You're going to find a slicer right here. Just select it. Now on this side, we see all the fields, so all the columns that we've just uploaded. Let's add the main topic to the slicer. So just place a check mark here and you're going to see your slicer update automatically. Now for visual, I'm just going to add a basic table. So just click to the side, make sure nothing is selected, and go and select the table icon. In this table, I want to have two things, the tutorial title, so let's just place a check mark here, and the link to video. I'm going to add that in, and let's expand this so we can see it better. Now we can take a look at different accounting videos. Let's expand it even more to make sure everything fits. Let's collapse these and zoom in. Videos about Edge, videos about Excel. There's lots of them. About Power Automate, Teams, and so on. These are all clickable links. So congratulations, you've created your first Power BI report, right? So remember, first step was to get data, and then we cleaned the data. If you think of this in terms of cooking, it's as if you're preparing your ingredients for the dish. You're just cleaning them up. Then comes the appliances and the cooking techniques that you're going to use. That's your data modeling skills. You know, some dishes don't need that many appliances. It's very simple to make. And some might need more. And finally, the fun part is right here in the reports. This is where you, your team, and your managers get to appreciate all the hard work that you put in. It's like plating your meal. It can be as fancy as you want or as basic as you want. Now, I know this was a lot of information. You saw so many different things, but I hope it shows you that learning Power BI is easy. You can do it. You just have to start feeling comfortable in this application and understand how the different parts fit together. I'm going to take you through the most important ones in the fast lane, and then on the expert lane, we're going to go through each of these features in a lot more detail. Get ready to start your first project. The purpose of this module is to help you test drive Power BI by creating your first dashboard. So far, I just gave you a general tour. Now, I can tell you how easy it is to get started. I can tell you how great it is, but you're not really going to know if it's right for you until you have a chance to test drive it yourself. This is your chance. Imagine you've been working at a company called Office Plus at their flagship California store for about 2 years now. Office Plus is a company that mainly sells office supplies. You're their main data analyst. Your go-to app is Excel, of course, whenever it comes to preparing reports. Now, recently the higher-ups had a gathering and they've decided that they need to improve reporting. The current reports are too static and they want to slice and dice more. They've chosen you for this project and given you these requirements. They need sales by department, and they need to be able to easily see the top-selling products. They want to know which products sell best online, and they'd also like to analyze sales trends for the top products without the report getting too crowded. Since there are hundreds of different products, they hate scrolling in Excel files. The marketing exec is interested in our reach outside of California and how our sales are developing there. But here, it starts to get interesting. The product manager wants to be able to create her own Excel pivot tables. She doesn't want to be limited to what you create. And the regional director wants a mobile dashboard. The first tool you think of to create this analysis is Excel. But you've been hearing a lot about Power BI lately. You have a feeling that it might meet all of the management's requirements, especially when it comes to sharing and making it available on the web. So even though you're new to Power BI yourself, you decide to take this opportunity to test it out. Maybe create a stunning report, and you get to convince the higher-ups to invest in a paid license for the company. Well, what about the data? How's that organized? There's a text file extract from the in-house sales system with all the transactions from January 2020 up to September 2022, so end of the third quarter. Each transaction is recorded with a transaction number, date, customer number, product code, transaction type number, which basically means if it was sold online or in store. Then there's the quantity, sales price, and finally the sales value. More information about these codes like customer, product, and so on is available in an Excel file. We have 3 tabs. Each has a table. The product table includes the product codes, like the same ones that we saw in the text file, but it has more information about each code. There's a similar structure for customer, where we have the customer's name, city, state, and country information. Only registered customers, though, have numbers. So if someone comes to the store and doesn't have the Office Plus member card, they're going to get a generic customer code. Transaction type is simple. There's just a 1 or a 2. 1 stands for store purchase and 2 when the customer buys the product online. So these are your 2 files, text files with sales data and an Excel file for the master data. Now it's time to get started. You could research all you want, but there's nothing like taking action and testing it out for yourself. You start in the free desktop tool that you've downloaded from the Microsoft Store and decide to learn as you go. It can't be that hard to get started, surely. Okay, so first up, open up Power BI Desktop. First thing we're going to do before we import data is to double check our settings so we're both on the same page. Just like when you buy a new car, you want to adjust some default settings like adjust your seat, your mirrors so that you can have a safer, smoother ride. That's what we're going to do in Power BI. Let's go to File, Options and Settings, Options. Under Global, go to Regional Settings and make sure that your model language is set to English. So for me, it says use application language. The language of my Power BI application is English, so that's fine. If your application language isn't English, change this to English United States. That's because the model we're creating is in English. It has English city names, English country names, English headers, and so on. Next, go to Security. Scroll down and place a check mark for Use Map and Filled Map Visuals. We're going to be using these in our dashboard. Then we have some settings for the current file. Under Regional Settings, make sure your locale for import is set to English United States. That's because the report we're creating and the data that we're loading is English US data. The dates, for example, have month first, then day, and then year. Under Data Load, make sure you have a check mark for Detect Column Types, Import Relationships, Auto Detect New Relationships, and Auto Date Time. Now, you are going to see these in action later on in the course, and I'm going to be explaining where these come into play later on. Once you're done, click on OK, and we're ready to get started. Just to make it easier for you, I've also added these settings to a template. So obviously not the global settings, because those you have to define yourself, but the current file settings. So if you want, you can go ahead and open the file, which you'll find in your file downloads in section 2. It's going to be called One Starting Template. If you double click this and open this up, you can use this as your starter file. It's an empty file. The only thing it has applied are those current file settings. So it's up to you. Either use this file or adjust the settings on your own. Also, don't forget to save as you're working through this dashboard. So click on Save here. If you want to save it as a different file name, go to File and Save As. So now we're ready to import the data. So our sales data is in a text file. We're going to go to Get Data, Text CSV. Browse to find your file. I've saved my files on my C drive. You'll find the sales data in the S02 First Dashboard folder. Click on it and select Open. You'll first see a preview of your data. So this is Power Query in action. It's correctly recognized the delimiter. In case it doesn't, you can adjust the selection here, but it generally does a good job in picking out the right delimiter. You have the ability to either load it directly to your Power BI data model or transform it. It's always good practice to double check your data before you load it to Power BI. Why do you want to do that? Well, you want to make sure that you load clean data into Power BI. If something doesn't belong there, if you don't need it in your data model, you can get rid of it at this stage. If there is any cleanups that you need to do, you can do that at this stage. So it gives you the opportunity to make sure and confirm that you are sending clean data into your Power BI data model. What do I mean by clean data? Well, clean data is something that looks like this. Each column has one thing. We're not mixing up customer number and product number in the same column. Each one is in a separate column. We don't have empty rows, empty columns. We don't have dates, numbers, and text in the same column. Each column has one single data type. By data type, we mean that if it's a number, if it's a date, text, and so on. These are not mixed in together. Now at this stage, you also want to make sure that you have the correct data types applied. So this is a date column. Make sure that you get this calendar icon here, which means that Power Query has recognized this as a date. To change a data type, you can click on this drop-down and adjust it here. In this case, I don't need to change anything. This is fine. Customer is recognized as ABC. This is text. That's fine. So we're just going to scroll along and see what we get. Quantity is 123. This is a whole number. Sales price is a decimal number. And sales value is a decimal number as well, which is fine, but we could adjust this to a fixed decimal number by changing it to currency, because we don't need all the decimals. And in fact, we don't have that many decimals to begin with. So I'm going to update this, and it's asking me if I want to change the column type, if I want to replace this. Yes, I do. And we're going to do the same for this one as well. Change this to currency. Now, in addition to this, notice on the side, Power Query has applied some steps to our data set. So it did this automatically. It noticed that our first row was headers and it promoted it, and then it automatically changed the data type to whatever it thought was best. That's thanks to the type detection settings we enabled at the beginning. And then we have the ability to adjust these. Now, if you need to do more cleaning, you could add the different steps here, and we are going to see how to do that later in the course. One thing you want to check is the name of your table. So this is the name of the query, which ends up being the name of your data table in your model. You can delete this and change this to what you want. In this case, I'm going to keep this name. Now, we have the ability to already close and apply. This basically sends the data to our data model, but there is more data we need to bring in, and we can do it directly from here. We're going to go to New Source. Since our master data is in an Excel workbook, we're going to select Excel Workbook. Find the master data file. It's sitting right here in the same folder, and click on Open. Now, Power Query is looking into the file and seeing what type of sheets or tables we have. So these icons that you see on top, these are official Excel tables, and these are the sheets. Place a check mark beside the tables, because it's always good practice to import the tables instead of the sheets, and then click on OK. Power Query is going to go ahead and create a connection to each of these tables in that file. And notice it's gone through and applied steps already to these. We're just going to double check that everything looks good. Transaction type number, transaction type name. The name of our table is fine. We can keep that. The product table, it has a lot of text columns, which is fine. Here we have a cost column. We can change that to a fixed decimal number as well. For customer, we have customer number, first name, last name, city, and so on. This all looks good. Nothing really to change here. So we are going to send these to the data model, and we do that by clicking on Close and Apply. Everything is being loaded to our Power BI data model. You can see it here on the side. These are different tables. Notice those are the query names that we kept. You have the ability to expand the tables here and take a look at the different columns that you have. Or you can view the data by going to the second tab here, the Data tab. So before we go through the settings here, I want to give you the opportunity to catch up with me. If you haven't done so yet, load the data to your Power BI data model, and then we're going to catch up in the next lecture. In the previous lecture, we uploaded the data and we saw that it ends up here on the data side. If at any point in time you need to go back to your Power Query window because you missed a step or you need to correct something, you can. Go back to the Home tab and click directly on Transform Data. This is going to bring up Power Query. You can cruise around to your different queries, make any necessary changes. Once you're done, click directly on Close and Apply, and you're going to see it reflected over here on the data side. Now, what table are we looking at? This is our Sales Office Plus data. We can see the name under Table Tools. These are our transactions. Now, if I click on the next one, this is the Customer Master Data Product Transaction Type Number. If you click on a specific column, you're going to see this expanded and you'll see it highlighted here. If I make a selection here, it's going to be highlighted on this side. Now notice also that Column Tools is activated. So Column Tools is important because it gives you the ability to refine the data even further. One thing you can correct in case it needs correction at this stage is the data type. So generally, if you define your data types correctly on the Power Query side, you don't need to worry about this because they are going to be picked up correctly. One thing you might want to update here is the formatting of your data. So for example, for date, if you want to show it in another way, a short date and so on, you can select it from here. Just remember, formatting is different to data type. Formatting is just a visual enhancement. It's like applying makeup to your existing data types. You can always update formatting later on as well once you create your reports. You don't have to necessarily do it at this stage. Notice sales price has currency formatting. It has 1,000 separators, so it came over fine. I could define the exact decimal place that I want. Just going to put a 2 here per center, and that's going to be updated. But you can also make these adjustments later on when you create your reports. Now, one thing that you might want to adjust at this stage is whether a column should be summarized or not. If a column has numbers, generally it's going to think it should add them up, and it adds that sigma icon here, which means this column can be summarized. In this case, for example, for transaction number, it doesn't make sense to summarize these. We can turn that off by going to here, so under Summarization Sum, just click on this drop down and select Don't Summarize, and notice that icon disappears from here. Another column we don't need summarized is the transaction type number. This is just a flag for our type of transactions, whether it's online or in-store. And notice that Power BI has picked it up correctly. It's not summarizing it. Why? That's because this column with the exact same name is part of our master data table here. So it has picked it up as an index column and not a column of data that needs summarization. Now let's go to our customer master data. So here there is another property that you want to adjust, and that's the data category. So data category is different to data type in the sense that it's more a description of the type of data you have. So for example, I'm in the city column. If I click on this drop down, notice it gives me options for address, place, city, and so on. I'm going to go with city. This tells Power BI that in this column, I have different cities. It helps it when it comes to creating map visuals. For state region, let's go to data category and change this to state or province. And for country, let's go back and select country. So notice there is county up here. Don't select that, select country. Notice also we get that globe icon beside our column name. Okay, so now we've refined the data type. The next step is to go and set up our model. Here we can define the relationships between our different tables. If we just had one big flat table that included all our master data and everything in one single file, then we don't need to worry about relationships. But because we have different files that are related to our transactions because they hold more information about some specific fields, then we need to make sure we have good relationships in place. Now, I'm just going to zoom out a bit, holding the Control key and my mouse wheel, and bring together the different tables. So Notice we have the table name or query name on top, and then we have the column headers listed here. And notice we already get some lines set up. These are our relationships between our master data and our sales data. And if I hover over this, I can see the related columns. So Power BI already automatically figured that these must be related because they have the same column name, and it picked up that it has a one-to-many relationship. The asterisk sign here represents the many side, right? Which is our sales data because we have multiple transactions. They could be online and in store, and we're going to have those flags, ones and zeros, repeated in this file here, but not in this file. This is our master data. It just has 2 columns and 2 single rows. Now, what about customer? I'm going to place it on top here. The relationship that it's picked up is between customer number from our sales and customer number from our customer master data, which is fine. But for product, it didn't pick it up correctly. And the reason is that they have different names. So we have product code here in the master data file, but we have product num on the sales side. It wasn't sure if they're connected, but not a problem. We can set these up ourselves. You just click on product code, drag and connect it to product number, and it's going to automatically set up a one-to-many relationship. Okay, so at this point, you've set up your first data model in Power BI. Next up, we're going to get started creating our visuals. Congratulations, you've done the hardest part. You've loaded the data, which we can view in Data View. You've added relationships between the data, which we can see in Model View. Now it's time to go to Report View and create some visuals. If you come from an Excel background, you're going to love this because you have a lot more options and the visuals are interactive by default. Make sure you switch your view to Report View. Right here, what you see is your canvas. This is where you're going to be creating your reports. On the right, you have your field selection. So these are the tables that we uploaded. And if you expand these, we can see our column headers. This is very similar to the pivot table field selection in Excel, if you're familiar with that. These fields are going to form the basis for our reports. Right here, we have the different visualizations we can select from, and we have some formatting options for our report. Now, once we add different visualizations to our report, we will get more options on the bottom here. Filters are filters that you can apply to your visualizations or to your report. This is something that we're going to explore more in the next lecture. So for now, just make sure that you have it collapsed. Adding a visual is super easy. You can either select the visual that you want as your starting point or select the field that you want. So for example, let's say I'm interested to visualize sales value. I'm just going to open this up and place a check mark beside sales value. By default, I get a clustered column chart. This is the default visual for numeric fields. Now, showing sales value like this doesn't really make sense. I want to break it down by a category. So let's say I want to break this down by department. I'm going to open up the product table and place a check mark beside department. My visual updates automatically. And take a look at this side. Department shows up under x-axis and sales value under y-axis. So Power BI tries to guess the best location for your selection. And generally it gets it right. But sometimes you have a lot of options and you might end up moving things around. By moving things around, you just have to interact with this. So if I wanted to, for example, move this and drop it somewhere else, I'm just going to click, drag, and drop, and it ends up on my x-axis, which doesn't really make sense. If I want to get rid of something, I can press the X here and it disappears. To add something, I'm going to place a check mark here, or I can click on it, hold it, and drag and drop it right here. Removing quantity from here can also be done from the fields. I'm just going to uncheck this and place a check mark for sales value again. To expand your visual, just click on the icons on the side here and expand it as you like. To move your visual, click on it, hold, and drag it and drop it where you want. I'm just going to place it on the side here. If you want to change this visual to something else, make sure it's selected and then switch your view from here. So let's say I want this as a tree map instead. I'm just going to click on tree map and I have the tree map. If I want a bar chart, just click that and it's there. I'm just going to put this back to clustered column chart. To add a second visual, just click on the side to make sure that nothing is selected and then make your selection either from the visuals or from the fields. So let's go back to the fields and this time place a check mark beside main category. For this, the default visual is a table because we're dealing with a text field. And by default, we get a unique list of values inside this category. Now I want this by, let's say, quantity. I'm going to place a check mark beside quantity and I can see it added here. I also want it for sales value. I can place a check mark, but there's another way that you can do this. So we saw clicking, dragging, and dropping here, but you can also click, drag, and drop it on your visual directly, and you add it this way as well. Now notice automatically I get this scrolling bar because my box is too small to show all the categories. This way I can scroll down, or if I just expand it so that it's big enough, then that scrolling bar automatically disappears. Okay, so now let's click to the side again, make sure nothing is selected, and this time we're going to add state region. So the moment I place a check mark here, the default visual for geographical fields is a map. I can see here with these little circles, these state regions that I have in the master data, but I'd like to analyze this by sales value. So notice this one has legend, latitude, longitude, bubble size. These are contextual depending on the type of visual you have. If you're not sure, like where should I drop sales value, place a check mark here and let's see if Power BI got it right. And it did add it to the bubble size, which is exactly where I'd like to have this. I'm just going to click on it and drag and drop it to the bottom here. Another way of adding a visual is just by copying and pasting. So let's say I want my starting point to be this visual. I'm going to select it, press Ctrl C and then Ctrl V, drag and drop it here, and then change it to a clustered bar chart. Now let's say I want to switch over the category from department to main category. What happens if I place a check mark here too? Well, it's adding it to the legend. No, that's not what I want. I'm going to drag and drop it here and get rid of department. Now I get a scrolling bar in my bar chart. Notice that this is automatically sorted in descending order by sales value. You can adjust this if you want. When you select a visual, you see these 3 dots on the bottom. This gives you more options. Sometimes they're on top, sometimes they're on the bottom. Depends on the placement of your visual on your canvas. When you select it, you can go to sort axis here and change the sorting order. So here it's sorted by sales value in descending order. I could adjust this to ascending if I want, or I can say I actually want this sorted by main category instead. And now I have the categories in ascending order. Okay, so we saw how we can add a visual by directly selecting the field. We saw how we can copy and paste an existing visual. Another way of adding visuals is by selecting it directly from the visualizations here. Let's say we want to add a card visual. Make sure again nothing is selected and then click on card and we get it inserted automatically in an empty area here. And the reason I keep saying make sure nothing is selected is because I also tend to forget sometimes I have this selected and then I go and I want to add a card and then I notice, oh no, I overwrote what I had. But Ctrl Z does work. You can press Ctrl Z to go back. Then let's go and select an empty space here and add our card to this. We can adjust the size as you need. For our card visual, we are just going to show the sales value. Now last, let's add a donut chart. So again, click in an empty area here and go ahead and select the donut chart. For this donut, I want to show the sales value. This time I'm going to select it, drag and drop it on my visual. And I want this broken down by transaction type name. Place a check mark or drag and drop it on your visual. Double check that everything ends up where you want it to go. So now that we have our visuals added, let's quickly take a look at some of the format options that we have. So I've selected the donut chart. We already saw that the options here change depending on the type of visual we have selected. If we want to format this, we have to go to the formatting icon here, and we have different options for the visual. These are also contextual. They depend on the type of visual that you select. And we also have general settings that apply to all the visuals. So these are pretty much the same for any visual that you select. The ones that are different are these ones. Now, when it comes to formatting your visuals, it's a jungle. You have so many choices. Like some visuals have a lot more than others. Like look at this table, look at this one. This one would be similar. This one is the least. There are so many different things to choose from, and it really pays off if you take some time and take a look at some of these options. For example, the legend for this is on the side. I could go and change the position and put it on the top left, or I could just turn it off altogether. Then under data labels, which are on, I could show the legend. So under label contents, I'm going to click on this drop down and select all detail labels. If I want to change the title of this, I can. For that, I have to go to general. I could turn the title off, but in this case, I don't want to. I'm going to click on this drop down and change the text to sales value by type and press enter, and that updates over here. Okay, so lots of options to choose from. Take your time and see what's available. For example, for table here, the font size is really small. I want that to be a lot bigger. I can update that under visual, values. Here I can select the font and the size, the color, and so on. So I'm going to make it bigger so that we can read it better. For this column chart, for example, I get these axis labels. Say I don't want them. I want to turn them off. So for the x-axis, I don't want to turn the entire axis off because that way I can't see the different departments. Instead, I want to go down here and turn off the title. For the y-axis, I do want to turn the entire thing off because I want to add my data labels directly to the bars here. Actually, under y-axis, I also don't want to show that axis title, so I'm going to expand this, go to the bottom, and turn off the title. Now, a pro tip here is that you have the Format Painter available. With this visual selected, I'm going to copy the formatting of this and apply it to my bar chart. That saves me from adjusting all these settings from scratch again. If you think this is cool, wait until I show you this. In Power BI, you get the ability to show default tooltips. So if I hover over this, I can easily see that this is online purchase, and I can see the value and the percentage. If I'm not sure which country or province this is, I just hover over it and I see this is Ontario. Sales value is 3,167. You get these default tooltips that you can also customize. But the best part is this right here. If I click on this column, the other visuals all update based on my selection. If I select Creative Arts, the selection updates. Now, two different behaviors are reflected here. One is called cross-highlighting, which is what's happening to this visual here and to this one. This gives me a lot more insight into my data by showing how this category is reflected in the other visuals. So if I just hover over the donut chart, I can see that the highlighted area corresponds to 11.5%. The main categories that are part of creative arts are hobbies and art, music, and so on. The other ones that aren't highlighted don't belong to creative arts. Now for the map, the table, and the card, I don't get the cross-highlighting because it doesn't really make sense here. Instead, I get what's called cross-filtering. So these visuals are filtered down to only show the values that apply for creative arts. If I go to celebration, for example, notice it's a lot less regions that we're selling it to, and I only have one main category here. So these are being cross-filtered, whereas the bar chart and the donut chart are being cross-highlighted. Each visual has its default behavior, but you can change that for some visuals. And we're going to see that later in the course. Now, What I'd like you to do before you move on to the next lecture is to treat this page as a playground. So we're just going to rename it as well. Let's just double click and change it to playground. Add some visuals, then go ahead and take a look at different formatting options you have for those. Play around, and once you're done, meet me in the next lecture. In the previous lecture, we saw that as we interact with a visual and we make a selection, we apply that selection as a filter to our other visuals. So we can see cross-highlighting in action here and cross-filtering for these visuals. Now, the way we can tell that there is a filter applied and what that filter is by hovering over the visual and then going to that funnel icon, and we can see filters and slicers affecting this visual. In this case, it's online purchase. For this one, online purchase, right? All of them are being filtered via our selection here. If I take away the filter, notice it says there aren't any filters applied right now. There is also a traditional way of applying filters, and that's by using the filters pane here. When you have nothing selected, you have two options. You can apply filters on this page and filters on all pages. So if you have multiple pages and you apply a filter, it's going to pull through to your other pages as well. If you have a visual selected, you're going to get this additional option where you can apply filters on this visual. So for example, let's say we want to apply a filter for state region. If I click on this, I could filter out California because the sales value for California is so big that it makes it difficult for me to compare all the non-California regions. So I'm going to select that and take away the selection for California. Now it's easier for me to compare the values for the other regions. So this is a part of basic filtering. You have more options like advanced filtering and top N here as well. Aside from applying a filter based on the fields that I'm using in the visual, I'm also able to add fields that aren't directly a part of my visual. So for example, I want to add a filter to my map where quantity is more than 10. Quantity is not a part of it, but no problem. I can go drag it and drop it in here, and I can add a filter for it. Show items when the value is greater than 10, for example, and then click on Apply Filter. So take a look at this visual. When I click on Apply Filter, the quantity filter is applied. Now, when I hover over the filter icon, I can see the two types of filters that are affecting this visual. If something else is active, so I'm looking at office supplies, and I come over here, I have 3 filters now applied. By default, readers and viewers of your report will be able to interact with the filter pane. But if you want, you have the ability to hide the filter pane from report readers. Or if you don't want to hide everything, you could hide specific filters. You could also lock filters so others can't change it. And if you want to remove your filter, click on Clear Filter. So for example, let's say the filter that we applied for state region, I want to remove that because I want to make that global for this page. I'm just going to click on this eraser and it's going to clear it from here. But when I hover over this, quantity is still active. Now I want to apply my previous state region filter as a global filter. So I'm going to go and grab that field and drop it here and now make my selection. So let's go ahead and remove California. And now this filter affects all the visuals on this page. If I hover over this one, I can see that the state region isn't California, is active here. Now, a more user-friendly way of adding filters is to use slicers. To add a slicer, let's just collapse the filters pane, open visualizations, and you need to select this visual here that has the funnel icon. Make sure nothing is selected on your canvas and then select the slicer. Just so that we can see it better, I'm going to add a bit more space. Let's remove the table visual. Just select it and press the delete button. I'm going to move the map to the side, bring this down, and let's move our slicer to the top. Now let's add year to this. Where can I find that? In my fields, I have date. Notice there's an arrow here. I can expand this. A date hierarchy is behind this, where I get year, quarter, month, and day separately. In my original data set, I didn't have any of this. I just had transaction date. Power BI itself went ahead and added this for me. Why did it do that? Well, remember, in our options and settings under data load, we had a check mark for auto date time. That's why it went ahead and did that. Now with the slicer selected, let's go ahead and place a check mark for year. Because I've selected a numeric field, I get this type of slicer where I can choose between my values. This is 21, between 21, 20, 22. I can adjust these as I see fit. And if it doesn't make sense to have such a view for the few number of years I have here, I can change my selection by clicking on this drop-down and selecting list instead. Or I might want to have a drop-down instead. Now I'll just put this back to between. And instead of year, let's select date. So if you select date specifically, you get more control over your exact date selection. You'll also get the calendar picker automatically activated, and you can go ahead and select your dates from the calendar. Now, if instead of date, we had another field like a text field, for example, transaction type name, the default view is list view. You can select one item at a time or hold down Control and select multiple items. To clear the selection, click on the eraser up here. Now I have a pro tip for you. If you don't have too many different categories here, you can disguise these as buttons. Go to the formatting options by bringing up the visualizations, click on formatting. Under slicer settings, you can adjust the orientation from vertical to horizontal. This gives you these huge buttons, but if I collapse this, I get them to be beside one another. Okay, so different ways of filtering your reports. What I'd like you to do now is to try and add a slicer and also add a page filter and a visual filter to your report. So just take some time, play around, and I'll catch you in the next lecture. We've already gathered some insights about our data, but we're somewhat limited in the terms of what we can visualize. Remember, when we uploaded our data to the model, we got this sigma sign for numeric fields. You have the ability to change the default summarization option from column tools if you want. You can go with average, for example. But you can also keep the default and change the summarization option for each visual. So for example, for sales by department bar chart, I could just change it from sum to count or average. These automatic calculations in Power BI have a name. They're called implicit measures. A measure is a calculation. An implicit means it was automatically internally generated. They make it easy for you to create reports, but the downside is you're limited to the available aggregation options we saw. It would be useful if we could run some additional calculations. For example, year to date, month-on-month change, sales from customers in California versus sales from customers not in California. In Power BI, you'll need to generate these calculations. And once you do, they're officially called explicit measures, but people just generally refer to them as measures. The advantage of these, aside from being able to write customized calculations, is that explicit measures are calculated once and can easily be referenced in other calculations, which is recommended for efficiency and flexibility. To create these explicit measures or calculations, we need to write formulas. The formula language is called DAX, which stands for Data Analysis Expressions. It has similarities with Excel formula language, and just like with Excel functions, you have basic and advanced functions, and also crazy formula combinations. One amazing feature of Power BI, though, is that you get to cheat. You don't have to write explicit measures from scratch. You can get Power BI to write some of them for you. This feature is called Quick Measures. They're like calculation templates. You don't have to know any DAX function or syntax. It's going to be written for you by the Power BI bot that works behind the scenes. Okay, so let's check it out. Over here in Power BI Desktop, go to Home, Quick Measure. And we get this pop-up where we can select a calculation. And in this drop-down, we currently have different options. We can select between the aggregate category, filters, time intelligence, totals, mathematical operations, and text calculations. As a first example, it would be good to take a look at the sales trend. So a time intelligence calculation like year to date would be great for our report. So let's select that. Below it, we see a short description of what this calculation does. And then we get to select a base value and a date. So these fields need to be populated from your fields list. The base value is basically what you want your year-to-date value to be based on. In this case, I want it to be based on sales. So I'm going to go with sales value. But if you wanted to calculate year-to-date for quantity, you would select quantity. In this case, it's sales, so I'm going to click and drag and drop it here. Next, it's asking for a date field. That's my date field. All I need to do is grab it and drop it in here, and I'm done. Click on OK and take a look at the magic that happens. The formula, this is your DAX formula, your first one that you've created in Power BI. Notice over here in Fields, we have a new one that popped up, Sales Value YTD. It has a calculator sign because it's an explicit measure that was created by you. You can change the name of this if you want directly from the formula bar, or notice this contextual menu bar here for measure tools. You can adjust the name from here. You can change the home table. So when we created it from here, by default, it appeared in the first table. If you don't want it there and you want to switch it somewhere else, you can do that here. You can also adjust the formatting right here. Now, what we want to do is go and test it out. Does it really work? Well, let's go to the next page and add a visual. This time, instead of a table, I'm going to go with matrix. So matrix is similar to pivot tables in Excel. You get the ability to add different categories to your rows and columns. In this case, I want to add date to this and the sales value and sales value YTD so that we can compare these with one another. Okay, let's just zoom in so we can see it better. This is our January value for both, which is the same, and then it's getting accumulated all the way to the end of Q4. Here we see the same value for the year-to-date version as the total for 2020. Everything checks out. Now, how about month-over-month percentage change? Well, I'd like you to give it a try. Go and create a quick measure and add it to this matrix. Okay, so pause this video, go ahead and do that, and come back and I'll take you through the steps. We're just going to go to Quick Measure, update the calculation, this time to month-over-month change. For base value, we're going to go back and select our sales value. Date is just our date field, and number of periods is 1. You can, of course, adjust this if you want a different number of periods. Now we're going to go with OK, and our month-over-month measure is automatically added. Let's just place a check mark here and add it to our matrix. Notice for January, we get a blank. February is the change to January, and in March, there is a drop. That's our minus 64%. Now, how about filters? So remember before we were able to visualize the sales in and outside California with filters. But to be able to visualize both of these in a single chart, we would need measures. Let's try out another quick measure, this time using filters. We're going to select filtered value, base value, again is our sales value. Now our filter is based on region, which is in the customer table, state region, drag and drop it here. And now we can select a value for our filter. So in this case, I want to restrict the filter to sales only in California. So I'm going to place a check mark here, and that's it. Click on OK. and I get my quick measure added. Let's update the name to read Sales in California. Percenter and our field name is updated here. Now, just to see the number associated with this, I'm going to add a card visual and place a check mark for Sales in California. Let's see what we get. 2.4 million. So now let's take a look at sales outside California. We're going to go back to Quick Measure. This time select Difference from Filtered Value. Base value, you guessed it, sales value. This is how we want to handle blanks. We don't have blanks in our data, so we're just going to leave that out. And our filter is our region from the customer table, and our value is California. So this time, notice we have difference from filtered value. And the definition is it calculates the difference between a value and its value with a filter applied. This is going to give us sales outside California. So when I click on OK, I can quickly update the name here and then press enter and my field updates here. Let's also add a card visual for sales outside California. Okay, we can see it's a lot smaller. This is in thousands, this is in millions. Now we want to visualize this with a donut chart. So let's quickly add a donut here and add both sales in California and sales outside California. We can see both of these in a single visual. Before we wrap up, I have a quick bonus tip for you that I think you're going to like. Let me just get ourselves some space here. So I'm going to add a matrix visual to the bottom. We're going to take a look at sales outside California, add year, and from the different channels, so transaction types, we are going to add transaction type name. This way, we can view our newly created measure, sales outside California, break it down by online purchase and store purchase. That's not all that I want to show you. I want to show you this. I can add sales outside California a second time to my values and then change these values by selecting Show Values as % of grand total. So when I select that, I can see sales outside California and then I get a percentage of grand total. So similar behavior to pivot tables in Excel. Now, if we scroll over, we can see store purchase sales outside California and then the percentage here, and there we have the totals. Now, if I change my view, show values as % of column total, I get my new calculations, update immediately, and I can also show everything as % of row total. You get more ways to slice and dice your measures. As you can see, quick measures allow you to quickly create additional calculations based on your data without prior knowledge of the DAX language. Of course, for more complex or more custom calculations, understanding DAX is going to be required. I hope you've enjoyed the free preview, and if you've never used Power BI, you did it. You made the first move, you went through the content, you did the clicks, and you overcame your own hesitations. You achieved more than 99% of other people. My own hesitations originally were Power BI is too technical and Power BI is difficult. And yeah, I soon realized it was neither of those. A big misconception about Power BI is that Power BI is just for presentations. After all, you can create beautiful reports with Power BI. But that's just one role that it plays. The beauty of Power BI is that you aren't restricted to the report that you or someone else on the team created. You have the ability to use the underlying data, the model, and all the calculations behind that to create your own reports and your own views of the data. And for those who love Excel like me, you're free to create pivot tables or entire Excel dashboards based on the same underlying data that the other reports were created on. It's really a true self-service business intelligence tool. I could go on and on about the capabilities of Power BI, but nothing beats testing it out for yourself. And you've done that by taking the first step with this free preview. Now it's up to you to decide if learning this tool can benefit you in any way. Sign up for the course and join our fast track. We'll finish what we started together. We're going to publish this report to the web and create a mobile version of that. You're going to see the entire process from beginning to end. As we do that, I'm going to introduce you to the most important parts of Power BI. You're going to be able to get the most of this tool in as little time as possible because I know you're busy. If you want to learn more, if you want to or need to deal with messy data, create proper models, write your own DAX formulas, and if you want to upgrade your visuals and presentations, then I invite you to continue your learning and go on the expert lane. You're going to be promoted there to a senior position at Office Plus headquarters. There, the complexity is higher. You're going to learn to go beneath the surface and up your skills so you're prepared for the future. And yes, the expert lane is included in the same course. It's as if you're getting a bundle of courses without paying the price of a big bundle. Thank you for joining this free preview, and I hope you join me in this exciting world of Power BI. I hope you've enjoyed the free